And I had a client who had, he took an early retirement from a large company that was privately held. He'd kind of gone as far as he could go without being a family member. And he took an early retirement. And he was well off and well-to-do, and I was working with him to help him think about next steps. And he told me this story, and it was sad, Randy, in this way. So he said to me, he traveled all the time, worked all the time, but he really made it a priority to always show up to like his kids' big events, soccer games, track meets, dance recitals, like graduations. He was there. So his kids are now grown and they've gone to college and they've come back, and one of them turned to him, one of his sons, and he said, Dad, you were always there for the big things, but you were never there for the little things.
Ooh, that hurts.
And it was the little things that matter the most. Wow.
Welding together practical insights and powerful conversations to forge world-class leaders. This is the Leadership Foundry Podcast.
This is the Leadership Foundry Podcast. I am your co-host today, Brandon Smith, and I am joined by my co-founder and co-host, Randy Hain. Randy, how are you, my friend?
Good to see you, as always.
Yeah, good to see you too. So I know we were talking about what topic should we cover today? What's kind of a hot topic, evergreen topic that we're constantly hearing from our leaders. And naturally, we settled on priorities.
Of course.
I mean, seems like that's just the common challenge for all of us today. We live in a noisy world, lots of stuff competing for our attention. So when you think about priorities, maybe a good way to kick this off, how do you see that show up with your clients and our clients? Where do you see that tension coming into play?
It's a constant part of a coaching discussion. Every time I'm talking to a client, working with a client, we always settle on this discussion about priorities. So clearly it's top of mind for the people that I work with. I assume the same for you. And what I find very interesting, and this is actually sort of a blog post topic that I'm working on right now, is I find that people have sort of an aspirational list of priorities. But that is sometimes compared to and in contrast with the actual priorities. So what I mean by that is aspirationally in a very calm place, if I were to ask you your priorities or if you were to ask me mine, we probably have the usual suspects. Oh, clearly it's faith and family and health and work, and work is a distant fourth. But when you actually work with clients and talk to them, it's usually the reverse. Work is always at the top, and all those other priorities get the scraps of time left over. So I think it's interesting to talk about the contrast.
Yeah, so I'm smirking. You can tell, people listening can't tell, because I've got a great question for you.
Yes.
It's a little bit of a curveball.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
You had your coffee?
I've had my coffee.
Okay. If you were to offer us a definition of what real priorities are, just take your best shot. What is that? How can we get a better handle on what are the real priorities?
I think real priorities are where you actually invest your most time and energy. So if you look at your calendar during a given week, where you have invested time and energy, if you look at the places and you kind of tally up the percentages for each, that really reflects your priorities. Now, you could probably have people in the audience arguing, well, I've got to work, I've got to do all these things. Granted, yes, but that doesn't mean that work has to be the dominant priority in your life. So I think, and we've talked about this before, if you want things to really matter, if you want things to really come to life in your daily world, you've got to be intentional. You've got to schedule them. You've got to make sure those things are not only on the calendar, but that you honor them. If you're a person of faith and you pray, if you exercise, those things need to be on the calendar and not get moved around with the whims of the workday. And if we schedule those things and schedule work around them, guess what? We'll be happier, we'll be healthier, and also work will benefit. That's my take.
I love that. I think that's beautiful. I'm glad you went immediately to time.
Yeah.
It's how we spend our time.
Yes.
So, priorities are, to me, it's a verb.
Yes.
It's not a noun. It's action. Where are you actually spending your time in a given week? That's your real priorities. The pie in the sky priorities are things that, we hope for, but it's not actually necessarily how we're operating. So I love that idea. Okay, well, I think everyone listening to this says, all right, well, that sounds pretty simple.
Yeah.
What makes it not so simple?
Well, this reminds me of an article that I read by Pat Lencioni, author Pat Lencioni, 20 years ago on Harvard Business Review. And in the article, he was talking about values. And he said, and I'll bring this back to priorities in a minute, but he said, on every wall in the lobby of every company building, you'll find sort of our values. These are our core values. Somewhere in the hallway, there's a poster that says our values. The website has the values listed. And those are the things that sound good, they feel good. It's their aspirational list of values. But then he talked about, in the article, accidental values. And he said, where you invest your time and energy reflects what your values are. And one of the funny examples that he gave that I think is very interesting, and I use it all the time, is if you're a company that's a meeting culture, well, meetings may have become an accidental value of your company because you spend all your time in them. So take that comparison into this priority discussion. We certainly have aspirational priorities, things that we care about and they sound great and we feel really good every time we say them, but maybe accidentally we have a different set of priorities. Maybe our priorities are just going from useless meeting to useless meeting. Maybe we're expending our energies unwisely during the day. We're not efficient with our time. All kinds of ways that we waste our time. So it's interesting to kind of think about aspirational and accidental, aspirational and real priorities. So
I love that. I love that. Okay, so since this is the Leadership Foundry Podcast,
Sure.
We're all about leadership.
Right.
I think a neat way for us to take this conversation is 2 buckets around leadership: leading self, leading others. Because after all, I think you and I would both agree that those are both important.
Absolutely.
So maybe let's start with the leading self part. So most leaders I work with, I know you have the same challenge, and it's even why author editor is so kind of evergreen for a lot of the leaders that we work with, is because they fall into that author role. They're firefighting way too much. They find themselves being drawn into the things that are seemingly urgent, but maybe not important. And that starts to crowd out other stuff. So for those leaders that find themselves constantly throwing on the hero cape, jumping in and rescuing and saving the day, but maybe not attending to their priorities as much as they should, where can they start? What's the starting place?
So, I'm fond of doing this. Let's actually take a step back.
Okay.
Let's actually go to what happens before we get to that sort of thinking. So I'm going to take you back to a conversation you and I had recently. You may not remember this, but we were talking about how it's interesting that we have been so blessed and humbled by the success that the Leadership Foundry's had, and our coaching practices have thrived, and we're grateful for that. But you and I are not metrics guys. Like, we're not always looking at every KPI, every metric, every goal. We just don't think that way. But if you remember, what we talked about is we got into a discussion about our why. Why do we do this? And I think what we settled on, I think we largely agreed, was we want to do work we love.
Yep.
We want to make a meaningful difference in the lives of the people that we engage with every day.
Yep.
And we want to enjoy the journey. So if you step back, for the question you just asked me for ourselves, we are pretty clear about why we do what we do. Now let's get to your question. If you're a leader and you're thinking about, okay, how do I get intentional? How do I manage myself during the day? You need to be clear about why you're doing it. I bet nobody who's listening to this wants a gravestone that says richest person in the graveyard. We've talked about that.
Yeah.
I don't want to be the one who was the guy that worked 10-hour days for my entire career. Who wants that on your gravestone? But you want to think about why you're doing it. Well, I assume that we're working for a larger, bigger purpose. I'm working for my family. I'm working for the impact that I want to make in the world. I run a company or I run a team, and I want us to do great work. Those are noble aspirations. So get clear about all that, and then schedule throughout the day activities that support your why. So that's kind of a high-end answer to what I think was a pretty easy question.
So I'm going to be a little geeky here.
Yeah,
Some of the folks who've attended our Leadership Foundry sessions know that one of the sessions when we talk about mastering urgency, we show the Eisenhower Matrix, the Stephen Covey Matrix,
Yes.
the urgent versus important. And so for those who aren't familiar, it's a 2x2.
Yes.
So your horizontal axis that goes left to right, if I remember correctly, that one is our urgent. And then the one that goes vertical, up and down, that is our important.
Yes.
Well, and so the idea is the box that is urgent and important, you got to focus on that one.
Right.
That's really, really important. And then the box that is important but not urgent comes second. And then the stuff that's urgent but not important, you should delegate, ignore, outsource, all that other
Right.
stuff. What I love about your definition is you just defined importance for us. You just told us how to define importance. Because if we don't do that, our boss's needs we might put that as important. And that's not to say it's not important, but that may trump something more bigger for us. So I love the way that you said that, because that allows us to kind of know what big rocks to put in first.
And this is very uncomfortable, Brandon, I think, for leaders, all of us. I think you and I probably struggle with this too. When you think about self-care, you have to take care of your own needs. You have to put the oxygen mask on your own face as the plane goes down. You have to do that before you can take care of others. So this idea of doing the things that matter, doing the things that are important, that probably for most is good health, family time, rest. If you're an introvert, I need a little alone time, whatever it is, taking care of yourself under this umbrella of self-care is something that you can't just say, I think that's important, I'll try it next year. You have to be intentional now. You have to plan for it. So that needs to show up in your calendar. And then once you've taken care of yourself, you're better able to serve the team that's under you.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about team in a minute, but I want to stay on personal for a second.
Sure.
So this was, it was well over 10 years ago. And I had a client who had, he took an early retirement from a large company that was privately held. He'd kind of gone as far as he could go without being a family member. And he took an early retirement. And he was well off and well-to-do, and I was working with him to help him think about next steps. And he told me this story, and it was sad, Randy, in this way. So he said to me, he traveled all the time, worked all the time, but he really made it a priority to always show up to like his kids' big events, soccer games, track meets, dance recitals, like graduations. He was there. So his kids are now grown and they've gone to college and they've come back, and one of them turned to him, one of his sons, and he said, Dad, you were always there for the big things, but you were never there for the little things.
Ooh, that hurts.
And it was the little things that matter the most. Wow.
I love that. It's sad, and you've told me that story before, and it hurts your heart to hear it.
Yeah, I almost tear up saying it because it really hurts.
But haven't all of us kind of gone down that path?
Yeah.
Some of us course correct, some of us don't.
That's right. And I think the reason why I'm mentioning this is because each year is different. So for example, this year, I've got a graduating senior in high school. That's a priority. This is going to be his last year in our house as a high schooler. And there's going to be some things that happen this year that I want to make sure I'm there for.
Right.
I've also got some aging parents. I've got an 89-year-old father, an 85-year-old mother, and you and I have talked about kind of the challenges with aging parents. Well, as difficult as they can be, I want to make sure I'm spending time with them, and then I'm making that as much of a priority as I can tolerate, so frankly.
Right.
But it's something on my radar this year that's a little different than my radar last year. So I think the reason why I'm mentioning it is, seasons of life change.
Yes.
And we don't need to just assume it's the same season year after year after year. Don't miss out on those rare opportunities, because you don't get a redo.
Right.
There's no mulligan on this one. If you hit it in the water, you hit it into the water. That's it. So I think that's also good for leaders to step back and think about what's unique this year in my personal life that's a season that I don't want to miss.
If you lose money, you can always go make more money. If you lose time, it's gone forever.
Yeah.
You can't regain time.
Yeah.
So I love what you said, and you're right. There's a seasonality to this whole idea of thinking about what matters, and certain things come and go. I've got a graduating senior from college. My dad is elderly now. Totally get it. But what's interesting, and this is counterintuitive, I think when leaders, when any professional hears this, think about, if you take care of the things that matter most in your life, we've named some big things like, graduating seniors and senior parents, your health, whatever it is. When you take care of those things, work thrives. It's counterintuitive. But in your own experience, haven't you seen it? And in the people that we work with, when you take care of those things that really are important, those priorities, then work benefits.
Randy, I'm so glad you said that, because, it made me think about this. We often think about those two things as separate.
Oh, they're integrated.
But they're integrated, and even in this so subtle but important way, who would you rather work for? Would you rather work for the leader that takes time to care for the relationships that are important to her or him, and they make that a priority? Or would you rather work for the leader that ignores all those and works 14, 50 hours a day? Maybe they're getting a little bit better results, but they just push aside all that stuff. We want the more holistic, well-rounded leader.
Right.
That's the person we want to be more like. That's the person who we want to mentor us. That's the person we want to be coached by, because they're going to give us guidance that is more life guidance. not just specific to a particular task.
And the thing I would also say is if you are listening and you're a leader right now that feels like, I've got some work to do, I'm struggling, you're not chained to a life sentence. You're not in prison. You can actually change the dynamic. You can make changes. So you and I write about this extensively. We talk about it on shows like this, but go figure out a way, with our help or the help of others, to find a way to change your paradigm, move in a different direction. If you don't like the direction of your life and you're working the 15-hour days and you're setting a bad example for your team, you're not chained to that. You can move in a different direction. And we encourage everybody that's listening to actually embrace change if you're in that category.
Yeah, and one thing I'd add to that, and then let's pivot over to leading teams. I would go one step further, very tactical, pay for it. Pay for it. And I'm going to say it one more time so everyone heard it. Pay for it. Because when you pay for it, you're invested, and you're less likely to cancel, and it's going to create a new rhythm and routine for you.
And that could be coach, it could be a class, it could be an MBA course, it could be a lot of things.
I've been giving Randy a hard time because Randy's got a great workout routine, and I do too. And I love mine, and I'm trying to get him over to mine, and we both have our preferences. And I hired a personal trainer. And what I've loved about having the personal trainer that's different than signing up for classes is when I'd sign up for a class, if I was tired, I just would cancel the class.
Right.
I mean, there was no real, maybe a small $15 penalty or something, not that big of a deal, right? Or they might waive it. But I'm paying for a trainer. He's waiting on me. He's blocked that hour. I'm not going to miss that. I haven't missed one of my training sessions with my trainer. And so I think when we pay for it and there's that investment, it ensures that we're going to hold ourselves accountable. And then that's going to ensure progress and change and the kind of change that we want. So that's my 3 cents on that.
So because I'm never going to get a personal trainer, ever, I just want the audience to know.
Matter of time, folks.
But
matter of time.
I have a different way of looking at that. So I exercise and try to stay healthy because I have a special needs son, and I also want to be around for my grandchildren. So I've connected the grind of the physical exercise, it's not always a lot of fun, to my sort of a future event, to being around for people I care about. So I have found a way to find the motivation, but for some, personal trainer, coach, consultant, whatever it is, get something. I agree with you. You've got to get somebody to help you if you can't find that external motivation.
Yeah. Okay, so let's now talk about prioritization as a leader with a team.
Okay.
So we talked a lot about setting priorities in our own life and living that out. How do we do that better as a leader with a team? And what are some of the things that we should be prioritizing over others? I know every leader's got different KPIs, different teams, different industries you're in, but there may be some common things we need to keep top of mind. So what, from your perspective, what do you see as some of those main things?
I want to build off some great points that you were making before, and let's build a bridge to the team. I think we need to set the standard. We need to model this behavior. If you're a leader, you can't look at your team and say, I want you guys to have work-life balance, and you don't do it, because they're going to follow your lead.
Right.
So let's make sure that we're modeling this. I think we also need to set sort of parameters around some of the easy things. Let's agree and model as a leader that we're not going to email at 8 o'clock at night, that we're not going to send an innocent email at 10 o'clock on a Saturday, because the justification we both hear is, well, I don't expect anybody to respond, but you and I both know if you're on the team and you receive an email from your boss, you feel obligated. You'll look at it and you'll probably respond. So set the standard, be the model, and set parameters around easy things like email, communication, stuff like that. Also letting people know that you expect them to have a life outside of work. All of you on my team, if you're a leader, they need to hear you say, I know you've got life events, you've got things that matter, I know I do too. We will talk openly about that. I will make sure that you get supported to go do what you need to do. I expect that support, and you're going to get it from me as well. Those are some easy things, table stakes, I think.
Yeah, and I think if we're a people leader, just by the nature of the title, people leader, one of our priorities should be our people.
Yes.
So I had this interesting 360 interview. It was for a client of mine that I'm working with. And so I was interviewing not her direct report, but her direct report's direct report. So skip level, 2 levels down. And this person, I interviewed this person, and she said, oh my gosh, my client she said, she's amazing. I really don't have anything critical to say. She's really, really great. But the thing I do have to say that's critical is more about our culture of our company. And this is what she said. She said, everything is great here until there's a fire or there's an emergency. And then the first thing we do is we cancel all meetings. particularly one-on-ones, to attend to the fire. And she said, well, that kind of makes sense. But then 3 weeks would go by. I wouldn't have spent any time with my manager. I finally had my meeting with my manager and update my manager on what I've been working on. Turns out it's not what they want me to be working on. I've been working on the wrong things. New fires emerged. So you can kind of see how this becomes a vicious cycle. So I do think, and you and I have talked about it before, in addition to setting those boundaries outside of work, make sure you're protecting that one-on-one time with your team. I mean, when you schedule 10 a.m. with Susan on Tuesdays, stick to that. It's really, really important. It's an opportunity for you to not only be there and coach and support, but also to help them focus on their priorities. Because part of our job as leaders, at least from our vantage point, is to set priorities for the team.
Right.
And everything can't be a priority.
And you have to look at it, time is a gift. And one of the things that you're doing when you cancel a meeting, and it's epidemic in the companies we work with, you're basically taking the gift away from the team. I had a gift here for you, but I'm not going to give it to you now, because time is a gift. Everybody wants some meaningful time with their leader. But the other thing I would also just kind of point out to piggyback on what you said is, I think it's important that leaders not only have clarity around their own priorities and be good role models, but also be curious about the priorities of others on the team. So one of the things we want to be doing in our one-on-ones is yes, set the priorities for what the team needs to work on, but I also want to be just insatiably curious about what matters to you. I want to know what really is on your aspirational list, and how can I make your aspirational list the reality list. So I want to know that you've got you're coaching your daughter's soccer game. I want to know that that's important to you, so I can support that and make it happen for you.
It's funny, Randy, you say that, because I can't remember the title of the book, so I'm not even going to try. But it was a recent Malcolm Gladwell book. Not Malcolm Gladwell, Marcus Buckingham. And Marcus Buckingham had written this book, co-authored with another person. And in there they talked about a piece of research studying the best managers. And they found the best managers asked 2 questions at the beginning of the week of each of their direct reports. What are your priorities for the week? Which is exactly what you said. How can I support you?
Love it.
Which is exactly what you said. So we've got research folks to back up exactly what Randy said. I mean, and it's that simple. It doesn't have to take long, 20 minutes. It's a 15, 20-minute call to at least start the conversation.
But doesn't this go all the way back? Everything comes back full circle. Getting leaders to do what you and I talk about, what we try to do, which is we're pretty clear about our why. We want to do work we love, make a meaningful difference, and we want to enjoy the journey. So if leaders are going into battle every day, knowing their why, their purpose, why am I doing this, and what are my priorities, and that enthusiasm comes out of them with their team, and they know that they too can really live the right priorities, the business will take care of itself. You can't make it 99.9% about KPIs and metrics. Those things matter. We have to run our businesses, but we also need to make sure that people are happy and healthy and engaged.
Okay, so I'm putting on my listener hat right now, Randy.
Sure.
And I know there's a listener out there that's thinking this to themselves.
Okay.
Yeah. This all sounds good. But what happens when my leader or the leaders in my company keep hammering me with new priorities and new initiatives? How do I live in this kind of perfect ecosystem you guys have described?
Sure.
When I'm constantly getting pressure from my leaders, because what we've seen, and we talk about it all the time, particularly in most Fortune 500 companies, most of the senior executives, they just make everything urgent all the time, pat themselves on the back and said, that's great, I created urgency in the business. But it's so much, it's actually chaos and confusion. They're diluting priorities rather than creating priorities. So if you're sitting in that messy middle spot as a leader, but you're getting pressure from others, how do you maintain that healthy bubble that we're talking about?
I'll take a stab at this, and I suspect you've got some other things to add, and this probably is another show. I think the one thing you just said is probably another show. But I think you have to really evaluate, okay, I, as a member of this team, I want to be here. I like what I'm doing. I enjoy the company, the vision. I'm plugged into something that I want to be part of. And if you've got that commitment level, you have to decide, what am I willing to do? Well, one of the things that you might do is start to push back respectfully with candor. Hey, listen, I'm not able to make that 7:30 call. I've got to take my daughter to school. So start to put some lines in the sand. And I know the argument, well, what if I feel like I can't? Well, you have to, again, decide what are your priorities. If taking your daughter to school is a priority for you, and when you have to say no, offer alternatives. I can't make 7:30, but I've got 8:30, 9 o'clock, and 11 o'clock tomorrow to make that call. Which one of those might work for you? We've talked about how to say no the right way. So you may have to say, okay, I want to be here, but I'm going to start putting lines in the sand around my schedule. Some places I'll compromise, but some places I won't. And if those priorities start to really weigh you down and you feel like this is no longer a place that I want to be, you might have to exit. I mean, again, it's not a life sentence. If you feel like the company has left me behind in terms of the culture and it's become toxic, I may have to look for a different environment.
Yeah.
Now, we're not advocating everybody quit their job tomorrow, but you have to make some really hard decisions about, I want to plug in and be part of the change, or I may have to exit. But the worst thing you can do is say nothing and suffer in silence.
I think that's so true. And when you step back and think about, what do we want from a leader? What do we hear people, our clients say they want from a leader? They often say, we want someone that cares about me. They're going to develop me. They're going to grow me. They're going to coach me. And as leaders, we need to hold people accountable, right?
Yes.
And so we need to do all those things. But they also say, and wouldn't we want this said about us? I want a leader that's got my back.
Yes.
I want a leader that's going to, protect me and support me so I can do my best work.
Right.
And when we're not putting up that wall or that filter and we're just letting it all flood down to our teams, that's a recipe for burnout. Our teams don't feel supported. They don't want to work for us anymore. And then we lose team members. And then when you end up with that, kind of vicious cycle. So I think it's also a question of what kind of leader do you want to be?
Right.
And if you really want to protect and honor and grow your team, we've got to sometimes have those candid conversations. And one of the things we often talk about in our sessions is, borrow from our friends at Improv. Say yes and. Yes, leader, I would love to help you with this. And the team is currently so backed up, the next time we can get to this is about 2 weeks. Is that going to work for you? So make it a little bit more of a negotiation or a compromise rather than just agreeing to everything that's kind of coming through your door.
What's interesting is you and I don't talk a lot about generational dynamics on the show. I don't think we've ever had that as a topic. But, you and I both speak to students. We both have students in college. And it's interesting to me, the more I engage in conversations with that emerging generation, Gen Z, the generation coming after it, it's just fascinating to me how much they're focused on lifestyle. When they think about their priorities, they really want balance in their lives. Now, those of us of a certain age, that was not our experience. You got a job and you liked it. You just took care of business. You did 50, 60 hours a week, whatever it was. That's not the dynamic of that emerging generation. And I admire them for it. I really do. I respect it. And I hope they attain it. But I like that their mindset coming into work is, work will not take all of me. So maybe there's something we can learn from younger professionals that are coming into the workforce. I think they're thinking about it the right way.
Yeah, I love that. So I know, Randy, we had some nice discussion today, talked about kind of leading self, leading others. This is a tough question, but it's my last question for you.
Sure.
Any closing thought? Any kind of way you could wrap all this up and put a big bow around it?
I think the best thing you can do is, I'm a big list guy. Get out your paper if you're listening to this right now, wherever you are, and start to write down what really matters to you. Make that aspirational list of priorities. And this week, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, make a commitment that you want your week to reflect that list of aspirational priorities. Be intentional, schedule it, honor your calendar. Let those things that really matter, coaching your kid's game, taking your kid to school, praying at lunchtime, doing exercise in the morning, whatever it is that you think is really important. And I want you to practice and give yourself grace. This week, I'm going to do my very best to honor my aspirational priorities. And you'll probably achieve maybe 50 to 60%, hopefully. And then the next week, try again and maybe increase the percentage. But start somewhere. And I think you just need to have the right list of priorities and then practice and give yourself, go for those small wins. That's my advice. You've got to start somewhere. Start with the list and just practice. And have someone hold you accountable. Get an accountability buddy.
Which maybe you could pay for, perhaps.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
So one more thing I'll add to that. So I asked you a question earlier and you said, I want to back up a little bit. And I'm going to take your answer. I'm going to actually go forward.
Got it.
Okay, so I love what Randy said. I want everyone to do that. However, before you do that, I want you to consider this question. I've been asking this question a bunch. I think it's a fun question. Let's say it is now January 1st, 2024. And you sit back to yourself and you say, gosh, 2023 was really, really a fulfilling, rewarding year for me, personally and professionally. I achieved a lot of the things that are meaningful to me in my life. In other words, I lived out my priorities. What would you want to see? So make that list of those things that you would want to have seen happen. I attended my kids' graduation. I got to spend some quality time with them before they went into the real world.
I was home for dinner every night.
I was home for dinner every night. I met my health goals. I feel really good about how I've turned around a couple team members and really grew and developed them. I feel really great about the accomplishments that my team achieved. Whatever happens to be. Paint that picture, and then based on that, then back up to exactly what you just said. Then what are the things I need to start doing today?
Love that.
So it reminds me of that famous theologian we often talk about, when we're talking in the Leadership Foundry sessions, Jim Fowler, who used to be at Emory's theology school, since passed away. But he used to say, as leaders, we want to give people hope and handles. I love that idea of hope and handles. So hope is kind of where do we want to go? Handles, what do I need to be doing this week to start moving me there?
And if there's any takeaway from today's discussion, you are not trapped in the way that you're doing things today. You can change. We all can change. So if you're not happy with the state of your priorities and the way you're executing them, shift, move in a different direction, get some help.
Yeah, agreed. Brother, great conversation.
Enjoyed it as always.
Welding together practical insights and powerful conversations to forge world-class leaders. This is the Leadership Foundry Podcast.